years back to that. Here's Zana. Israel is heavily bombing Gaza again. There is no ceasefire. Israel is repeatedly and single-handedly violated again and again. Domestic repression of protests and speech did not coincidentally coincide with Israel's renewed siege and bombardment of Gaza. I received the following text from a friend here. Huge explosions now, Zana, as if it's the apocalypse. All parts of the Gaza Strip are now under heavy bombardment. I just heard. There's no news about it here. It's so scary. How are you doing? The family. CNN. Israel says it's conducting extensive strikes against Hamas and Gaza, throwing doubt on the fragile ceasefire. Trey Yingst, on the other hand, says the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas is over. Israeli jets are now striking Gaza. Why is CNN talking about, throwing out fragile talks about the ceasefire when you got people like Barak Ravid? Israel resumes military operations against Hamas and Gaza after the group rejected U.S. proposal for extending the ceasefire. Israeli Prime Minister's office says Israel has declared that the ceasefire is over. Here's a statement from Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz have directed the IDF to act forcefully against the Hamas terrorist organization in the Gaza Strip. This comes after Hamas repeatedly refused to release our abductees and rejected all offers it received from U.S. President's envoy Steve Witkoff and from mediators. The IDF is currently attacking targets affiliated with the Hamas terrorist organization throughout the Gaza Strip with the aim of achieving the war goals defined by the political echelon, including the release of all of our abductees, living and dead. From now on, Israel will act against Hamas with increased military force. The operational plan was presented by the IDF at the end of the last week and approved by the political echelon. The war has returned again. At least 15 people, including 5 children, have been killed across Gaza. Gaza civil emergency reports. Palestinian civil emergency reports at least 35 airstrikes across Gaza, hitting Khan Yunis, central Gaza, and Gaza City, according to Al Jazeera English. At least 8 people have confirmed being killed in Gaza City. Tents in central Gaza have also been struck. Video shows killed and injured, including children arriving at the Indonesian hospital following strikes in Beit Hanun and Beit Laiha project in the north. Al Jazeera Live with Moin Rabbani.
Something that the Israeli government has repeatedly said it would not do. In other words, it signed an agreement knowing that it would refuse to implement it. And even during the first phase, we've already seen now for more than 2 weeks, there's been a renewal of the Israeli siege on the Gaza Strip. These are not the first air raids. Over 100 or 150 Palestinians have been killed with increasing frequency in the past few days. The other comment I would make is that Israel could not be doing what it is doing tonight without the approval of the United States. If Washington sends orders to Israel that Israel is required to implement the agreement and to basically stop the slaughter of the Palestinians,
so Muin,
it would immediately end.
Just to be clear on what you're saying, you believe that the United States will have known that Israel was going to carry out these strikes, and it's doing it with the backing.
And I think there are already reports that the Israelis are stating that they informed the Americans beforehand, which is another way of saying they sought and received U.S. permission prior to launching these strikes. Now, as far as the American attitude is concerned, that's also a little unclear. Do they hope to use these Israeli strikes, killing dozens of Palestinians, as a negotiating tactic, so to speak, to increase the pressure on Hamas to agree to a revision of the agreement, which the Americans themselves brokered in January, or have they given the Israeli government license to simply derail the agreement and resume their genocidal military campaign in the Gaza Strip? That part, I think, is still unclear.
Indeed. This is the critical question at this stage, is it not? That is this a negotiating tactic?
At least 30 Palestinians have been killed. Dozens are wounded. This is from Reuters. Reporter from Reuters. At least 30 Palestinians that were killed. Dozens wounded in Israeli airstrikes across Gaza Strip.
A deadlock on this point for weeks now. What is your sense? Is this a negotiating tactic, or is this the end of the ceasefire?
A negotiation tactic.
It's really difficult to say at this point. I suspect that
that's crazy.
From the American perspective, it's being seen as a negotiating tactic.
What a crazy way to
Israelis hope
negotiate.
to use this to derail the agreement in their
Let's just
entire.
kill 30 civilians and
So
continue.
we'll have to see how this plays out in the coming hours and days. But the key issue here
Now the number has reached
is
34.
that
More than
Israel
34
is not
killed
only
in renewed
refusing
Israeli
to
airstrikes
implement
against
its
Gaza. 5
commitments under
children
the
confirmed
first phase
killed.
of the deal,
At least
but is
50 others
refusing
have
to
been
even
wounded.
commence negotiations on the second stage of the deal. Hamas, from its perspective, believes it has shown flexibility by agreeing to a limited extension of the first phase, provided that serious negotiations immediately commence on the second stage. And this is something that appears to have been
It's like claiming that you're haggling to buy a horse by stealing the horse and then beating the shit out of that person. But you're like, well, I was just haggling.
Coming to us on the news.
$0 for this horse.
Now, Muin, Israel's PM and defense minister have instructed the military to take strong action against Hamas in Gaza. That's coming in from the office of the Prime Minister Netanyahu. So, I mean, just commenting on what we're hearing there, it does sound, Muin, that this is something quite significant. I mean, we have seen
it's
Israelis.
very significant when you already have dozens of dead and
Absolutely.
wounded.
Well, how much appetite? I mean, you're in the States. We've seen protests restart in various places around the world, including Canada, against the recent blockade by Israel. How much appetite is there? How is the world going to stomach Israel going back in this way and killing dozens of Palestinians once again when they're already so clearly on their knees?
Well, when that question can be asked in two ways: the international community and increasingly public opinion in the West.
Of course, it's Trump approved. Yeah, of course. Two Israeli officials told me that Israel notified the Trump admin in advance of the airstrikes and briefed it on the objectives. Look at that. Uniparty, baby. Fucking uniparty.
Not only the Trump administration, but also very much its predecessor, the Biden administration, which is not only lending their support or acquiescence to what Israel is doing, but is complementing it by launching unprecedented campaigns.
You care so much about your people that not even help them, and your people with you don't care about other wars. Why not join Ukrainians on the streets to protest and be louder but fight them? Are there some other war or no war? What are you fucking saying? My people? I'm Turkish, dog. All people are my people. And not only that, but I have also lent support to Ukrainians. Did you have a stroke while you were trying to type this out? What the fuck are you talking about? This community raised $200,000 for Ukrainians. Hello?
Now from Hamas, according to a senior Hamas official talking to Reuters news agency, Hamas saying Israel is unilaterally ending the ceasefire agreement. Where does this leave Hamas, do you think? I mean, how do they respond to what is happening now?
Well, again, I'm less interested in what Hamas says or thinks or what the Israelis say or think, because, again, the key decision about what's next is going to be made in Washington. As far as your question is concerned, I think Hamas will basically have the same position that it did during the past 15 months, which is of using the resources at its disposal to deny Israel the ability to basically declare a victory over the Palestinian people and to objectives of eradicating this movement either militarily or as a governing force in the Gaza Strip. And again, this may be either a short, sharp series of strikes or a longer-term campaign.
It's crazy because Donald Trump is supposed to be talking to Putin tomorrow, right? If I'm not mistaken. And he has mentioned that he's going to start talking about offering pieces of Ukraine to Russia in that conversation.
During the past several weeks of the suspension of hostilities, Hamas and other Palestinian organizations have been doing that as well.
Muin, I also want to ask you...
Why do you think they decided to break the
whether you-
ceasefire themselves instead of waiting for a counterattack from Hamas by starving them? The fuck do you mean? Because there was no counterattack. What are you talking about? When the moment that they said that they are looking for a counterattack, that they said that there was going to be a counterattack by Hamas, we should have known that Israel is going to start fucking bombing again. Israel has also never abided by the ceasefire principles at all. They literally shut off aid, humanitarian aid. They shut off humanitarian aid a week ago. That's the reason why the Ansar Allah movement in Yemen restarted the blockade in the Red Sea, and then Trump responded by blowing up Sana'a and killing a bunch of children there, like 30 plus.
And if they didn't, the attacks would resume on Israeli shipping. And the Americans basically responded with this ongoing indefinite campaign, according to the Americans, of airstrikes on Yemen to make the Red Sea safe for Israeli genocide. That's really all that can be said about it. But in the wider context, it also has to be seen in the context of U.S.-Iranian relations. The Americans made very clear that they view Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen, essentially as Iranian proxies, issued warnings to Iran. And again, you know, we could well be dealing with an administration that feels that bullying and shows of force are the best tactic to get the other side to accede to one's demands. But these are also fairly inexperienced people, whether someone like Witkoff or, you know, for that matter, someone like Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who, although he has very little to do with foreign policy in practice, does have these kind of pro-Israeli neocon ideological blinders on. And I think what they will realize is that this kind of brute pressure on adversaries can often be counterproductive and is very unlikely to achieve its stated objectives.
Okay, Muin, I appreciate your time this evening. Muin Rabbani, co-editor of Jadaliyya, an online magazine specializing on the contemporary Middle East, joining us there from Montreal. So Let's see if this is even making a dent on CNN, by the way, because I'm doubtful that they're even covering this, because they said, oh, the ceasefire is on shaky ground. Nazi government resume their aggression and genocidal war against defenseless civilians in the Gaza Strip. We hold the criminal Netanyahu and the Nazi Zionist occupation fully responsible for the repercussions of the treacherous aggression on Gaza and on the defenseless civilians and our besieged Palestinian people who are being subjected to a brutal war and a systematic policy of starvation. That statement coming in from Hamas in the last few minutes in reaction to the huge escalation we've seen over the course of the last few hours from Israeli military. Over 30 airstrikes on the Gaza Strip this evening. So far, we believe over the latest figures saying over 30 people have been killed. Many have been injured. No doubt that number is likely to change as we get more information. Let's go now to Hamda Salut. She joins us there from the Jordanian capital, Amman. That is, of course, because the Palestinian authorities suspended Al Jazeera's operations in Israel and the occupied West Bank. So Israel confirming that it's carried out these airstrikes. What more are we hearing from them?
Well, the army says that at the direction of the political echelon, that means the prime minister and the defense minister, they were instructed to attack different areas in Gaza. They're saying it's because Hamas refused a lot of different things that were offered by negotiators and by Israel when it came to these ceasefire negotiations. But it's important to remember that these are negotiations that were largely stalled and failing after Israel refused to go into phase 2 negotiations on February 6th. That was day 6 16 of phase 1, saying that they did not want to commit to an end of the war. And several Israeli analysts, several within the political opposition, and several within Netanyahu's own government said that this was the plan all along, a resumption of the fighting to go back to full-scale war. And in fact, there's a new army chief of staff, one who said that 2025 is going to be a year of war, noting that Israel still has a lot of goals to accomplish when it comes to the Gaza Strip, meaning that they are in no way finished with their military action. So what we're seeing tonight are large, intensive strikes all across the Palestinian territory, with at least 34 people killed. We're hearing that at least a dozen of them are children. This is also an important time of the year for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. It's Ramadan. It's the middle of the night. This is when people are typically asleep and in a couple of hours waking up for the morning prayer. So not only is it Ramadan, but there's also a humanitarian siege on the Gaza Strip where more than 96% of the population is food insecure. But the Israeli military has said that humanitarian aid is not something they want to provide, saying that, in fact, Hamas is the one who is exploiting the humanitarian aid, when we do know that Israel repeatedly throughout the 15 months of fighting was constantly obstructing goods, aid, fuel, and anything else that was under the bracket of humanitarian assistance into the Gaza Strip. So Israel says that they are resuming the fighting, going to attack different targets in Gaza. But what's different this time around is that you have tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people who have returned to areas that were largely evacuated, people that were forcibly displaced from the north. A majority of them have gone back. And Israel says that Hamas is regrouping. That's also according to United States assessments. But areas where these
CNN is live reporting on it now. Let's take a look.
About what drove this decision by Israel to resume its strikes inside Gaza tonight.
Well, Caitlin, this appears to be the end of the ceasefire as we have known it for over a month and a half now, nearly 2 months at this point since the ceasefire came into effect, as Israel is carrying out what itself describes as extensive strikes throughout Gaza. We have been hearing from reporters on the ground who work with us inside the Gaza Strip saying that the heavy bombardment has been in southern, central, and northern Gaza, but particularly heavy in central Gaza, where Al-Auda Hospital alone is reporting at least 70 injuries. The civil defense spokesman for the Gaza Strip says that at least 15 people have been killed, including 5 children at this point. As for what drove this decision, the Israeli prime minister says in a statement that it was Hamas's repeated refusal to reach an agreement over the release of additional hostages, including just last week when Steve Witkoff, the U.S. Special Envoy, flew to Doha, Qatar, and put forward a proposal on the table that would have seen an additional 5 living hostages released, a number of deceased hostages, in exchange for a month or month and a half extension approximately of this current ceasefire agreement. Hamas, for its part, has continued to insist that it wants to see the previous ceasefire agreement implemented, meaning getting to phases 2 and 3, which would ultimately lead to an end of the war in Gaza and the withdrawal of all Israeli troops. But this Israeli government made repeatedly clear that it was not interested in engaging in those longer-term negotiations.
Interestingly enough, it was supposed to be Israel's proposal, according to Biden.
Tactics. And now we have seen, after Israel blocked aid to Gaza for the last 2 weeks, it is now conducting extensive airstrikes in the Gaza Strip and making very clear in the statement from the Prime Minister's office tonight that they intend to continue to escalate that military action. So far, no word of Israeli troops going back on the ground in major areas of the Gaza Strip, but certainly that could happen next. Hamas, for its part, saying that Israel has decided to unilaterally end this ceasefire and calling on the United Nations to hold an urgent meeting on this matter. Caitlin?
Yeah, we'll see if they do. Jeremy Diamond, thank you for that reporting and joining us very quickly here. My next source on this breaking news, CNN political and foreign affairs analyst Barak Ravid, who's also been reporting on what led to this. You know, obviously, Barak, U.S. officials were trying to get an extension. You just heard Jeremy talking about that. What are you hearing from sources about why tonight?
I think it was a combination of factors. I think one of the factors was that the Israelis, at least what I hear from Israeli officials, that they felt that the negotiations over the extension of the ceasefire and another hostage release is not going anywhere. Another reason Israeli officials mention is that they saw Hamas regrouping and getting ready for possible attacks against Israel. And there's also domestic political reasons, because Netanyahu gave Hamas another 2 or 3, even 3 weeks of ceasefire without getting anything in return. And there was more and more pressure from within his own cabinet to resume the war, and not to mention the fact that he just fired the head of the Shin Bet intelligence agency yesterday. So I think when you add all those things together, you get to this specific timing.
Yeah, of course, the firing of the Shin Bet was incredibly notable as the backdrop here. The other question, given how closely Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, who's, to remind everyone, he's the one who's been going to Russia to meet with President Putin. He's also been going to Doha and to Israel to meet with officials there on this other war. Do we know if Israel informed the White House that it was going to resume strikes in Gaza tonight?
Yes. 3 Israeli officials told me that Ron Dermer, Netanyahu's confidant, and Israeli military officials notified in advance their U.S. counterparts, the White House and the Pentagon and CENTCOM, that this is coming. They explained the objectives of this move, of those airstrikes. And I think that you mentioned that Mr. Witkoff is also the envoy for the Middle East, but also an envoy to Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump will speak tomorrow with Vladimir Putin. He was supposed to speak with him about the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. I think that the ending of the ceasefire in Gaza will be a major issue in this call. And another thing, Donald Trump assumed office when there was a ceasefire in Gaza. And I think now there's a big risk that this resumed war that could take between another 6 to 12 months could hijack a lot of Donald Trump's foreign policy agenda, because we all know how much this war took over international attention. There's no reason to think that it's not going to happen again.
That's a really good point, Barak Ravid. We'll see how it changes the White House calculus. Thank you for that excellent breaking reporting tonight. And of course, speaking of Trump and what's been happening at the White House, you saw overnight President Trump was claiming that some of the actions taken by President Biden, those pardons in his final day, were void because of how they were signed. Up next, here at the White House.
Oh, my God. Here is Zana's analysis on it. The next 24 hours could be the most critical 24 hours in the past 17 months. In less than 12 hours, Israel's launched multiple airstrikes in South Lebanon and South Syria, which have had their own cross-country violence at the border. While the U.S. has carried out major attacks in Yemen that killed upwards of 50 people, Israel has now also resumed heavy bombardment across Gaza. Iran is on high alert, anticipating a possible U.S. strike following Trump's threats. The Department of Defense just announced that 3 additional aircraft carriers are heading to the Middle East. I love the peace candidate, man. I fucking love the peace candidate. If they released the hostages, the ceasefire will still be on. In your fucking wildest dreams, I think. It's wild to genuinely think this. Like, you have to be broken in the brain. Yeah, you don't understand. The best method for releasing hostages is by releasing them from their lives, by killing them. Is that the take here? Like, terror. They are doing terror. They should release the hostages, which is why we are killing the hostages. You okay? The biggest brains are out on this one. Khan new spin on it. Among the targeted, of course, senior figures in the political wing and commanders in Hamas. Oh, of course. Of course. Is it Hasbara spamming about Christian villages slaughtered in Syria? No. No, not at all. HTS is Israel aligned, but it doesn't really matter because Israel doesn't care. They have, one, eviscerated the entirety of the Syrian, like they've destroyed as much military equipment as they possibly could, even after HTS said that they're not interested in fighting Israel at all. Okay. They've literally said that they're shuttering the operations of any sort of like Hamas or any sort of like Palestinian resistance groups that operate out of Syria. Israel still blew the fuck out of Syria. They took more and more territory in Syria. And not only that, but on top of that, the HTS, like former Al-Qaeda head that is now leading Syria, has had a bunch of his coalition forces drop mortars on top of Alawite villages, doing massacres over and over and over again. So no, that's not Hasbara at all. Syria is completely fucked. Israel is taking advantage of the situation in Syria by taking as much land as possible from Syria. It's a thirst that will never be quenched. Israel's ambition for territorial expansion is just like unstoppable. Don't lie about Syria. That's a lie. That's a lie. I'm saying a lie. I thought the regime defenders and their takes was to say, oh no, those guys have been punished. Actually, there were some bands underneath the HTS coalition forces, but they've been punished. Not that it didn't happen at all. Yes, you are lying. Jesus Christ. So what happened? Yes, the government is not massacring Alawites. Is that what I said? Is that the word that came out of my mouth? Is that the words that came out of my mouth? No, it's not. So why are you putting words in my fucking mouth, dumb fuck? That's not what I said. No, you heard. I used my words very carefully. I didn't say HTS is dropping mortars. I said HTS aligned coalition forces are dropping mortars on Alawite villages. I used my words very carefully. You got horny to say, that's a lie. Don't lie about Syria. Dumb fuck. It's not my problem that you misunderstood what I was saying. Nothing I said about Syria so far has been even remotely controversial. What does Israel even want? I mean, complete domination, more land, ethnic cleansing of all the lands that they take over. What is this? Lol, you're so dumb. Israel just bombed them today. They can't do shit, dog. Lol, what is this analysis? Yes, you are, lol. How are they Israeli aligned? Substantiate that for us. Yes, they're Israeli aligned in the sense that the HTS leadership is a American invention for the most part, and they are clearly backed by American and Turkish interests. Turkey is a representation of America, okay? It's not an accident that he gets puff pieces on fucking CNN and numerous other Western outlets, and yet he is still considered to be dangerous and unstable due to his background, which is precisely the reason why Israel has been taking advantage of the instability in Syria and blowing up all of the fucking military equipment that they can. Why didn't America lift the sanctions then? Brother, come on. Are you okay? Are you, please, are you all right in the brain? You think that the United States of America actually hates the fact that HTS is now in charge? Is that what you think? There could be a number of different reasons as to why they want to maintain a destabilized Syria. You know, considering that if they lift the sanctions, allow Syria to rebuild, what happens if one of the coalition partners that is not fully on board with HTS and feels as though they are they have created this this government that maybe doesn't have a lot of interest in following through with the democratic process, or maybe they become unpopular and gets over fucking thrown. In that process, all of a sudden, all of that military equipment that Israel didn't bomb, or all of the sanctions that weren't lifted, in the hands of the bad guys. Nothing happens in Syria without America's go-ahead. What the fuck are you saying? It is literally one of the only conflicts that I can think of where America is on every side of it. Like literally every side. With, I guess, the exception of Bashar al-Assad, who was also awful in his own right, obviously. But with the exception of Assad, who was weak, feckless, and a horribly violent leader, okay, America funded the Kurds on the one hand and offered them logistics and training, weapons. America, by way of Turkey, created a Salafist brigade. And this is before we, of course, talk about, you know, fucking the ISIS and Al-Qaeda forces in the region. You know? Is anyone going to challenge us on U.S. on this, or us? What do you mean? I don't know what this link is. Like the pro HTS line is supposed to be saying that it's actually Assad aligned Alawites that are causing instability, and that's why they're violently trying to squash the rebellion, and that the rebellion, if it gets too far out of hand, as it has already, it's one of the most violent massacres in the fucking Syrian civil war. Obviously not to the same degree, but it's close. Okay. But the casualty numbers are only happening because random brigades that are under the HTS, like random brigades inside of the coalition under the HTS, are acting out of their own personal interest in an effort to, maybe in a heavy-handed manner, decide to violently squash Alawite protests, which is fucking ridiculous, by the way. That is completely unacceptable. Yeah, they're dropping mortars on captive civilian populations because of their interest in stopping the Alawite from rising up. Oh.
Situation on the ground. We can speak to Tariq Abu Zoom. He joins us once again on the phone from Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. So, Tariq, I believe the latest death toll now is 59 people dead. What more can you tell us about what is happening there?
Yeah, this is an absolute madness. We are talking about 59 Palestinians confirmed killed in the past few hours, while more than 150 others have been confirmed killed. During the past hour, we have seen that there has been a very tangible intensification of airstrikes on Al-Nusayrat refugee camp, where these attacks have been carried out by Israeli air forces, that drones, fighter jets continue to hammer residential buildings, makeshift centers, what we could completely see in the city of Khan Yunis and the Marfa area, where 2 makeshift tents have been struck by Israeli fighter jets. 14 Palestinians that is confirmed killed in the attack. And we can see that there has been more momentum of airstrikes took place on targeting residential buildings that are packed full with civilians in Al-Nusayrat, in Gaza City as well. We can see also, based on eyewitnesses' accounts, that there has been an active displacement movement from Al-Mughraqa and Al-Nusayrat area in the central areas of the Gaza Strip. Families have started to be displaced in order to find any alternative shelter from the houses and the areas that witnessed extensive bombardment and attacks by the Israeli
And they got Trump's approval for this, by the way.
that have been struck did not receive any sort of warning. We saw emergency ambulances started to turn up in these locations and evacuating, but since they have been supported and banded together by the help of volunteers who started to evacuate casualties to Nasser Hospital by using the donkey carts. We have seen a very devastating image for Palestinian children being torn to pieces, for entire families being obliterated, and now there is more escalation is taking place. Simply Israel said that Hamas did not show any flexibility and there has been no progress in terms of the ceasefire talks. Hamas side has confirmed that Israel has unilaterally violated the ceasefire agreement, and now by systematic escalation, the situation is getting much more worse. We can absolutely hear the thunder of the Israeli drones outside. It's completely overclouding the entire sky of the central area, and that situation leaves people quite uncertain about what might come next. Specifically, that till now, all these attacks have been carried out by aerial forces, and there was no any ground invasion that took place so far. What might happen if there's no any sort of advancement in these talks, which bring us back to ground zero regarding what was happening before 15 months in terms of the high rates of killing, high rates of devastation, and the humanitarian misery that is completely complicated due to the Israeli ongoing ban of aid entry for more than 2 weeks so far, Malin.
Okay, thank you for now. Tarek Abu-Zoum there joining us on the phone from Deir al-Balah, trying to give us a sense of what is happening on the ground. Just a few more lines to bring you that are coming through to us from Israeli military officials saying the Israeli military is prepared and is spread out in all arenas. Presumably that means throughout Gaza. And then another line saying that again from the Israeli military official, says that the offensive will continue as long as necessary and will expand beyond airstrikes. Some of the latest lines that we are getting, another line here saying that the Israeli military is targeting mid-ranking Hamas commanders and leadership officials and infrastructure in these latest strikes. The latest number of these that we're getting, over 50 people killed in the last few hours in these strikes by the Israeli military all across the Gaza Strip. Let's get more reaction from Benjamin Friedman. He's policy director at Defense Priorities. He joins us from Washington, D.C. So these latest Israeli strikes on Gaza taking everyone by surprise. The American media reporting that the White House was consulted ahead of these strikes. Your reaction to what is happening?
Well, it is a surprise in the timing, but it's not surprising that the Israelis have broken the ceasefire.
No, Trump's ceasefire push. So we can say that the Trump ceasefire when he was inaugurated was just spectacles? No. It was so that he could engage in emergency funding to Israel. As I said at the time, the only important aspect of Trump's ceasefire was the fact that he was capable of getting Israel. He could have kept re-upping Israel and rearming Israel without a ceasefire at all. But he did. He was able to get Israel to at least say yes to a ceasefire, maybe with assurances that Israel could pummel Gaza even more later down the line. But this is precisely what I told you. Trump's ceasefire proposal was most likely to, allow Israel more space to do this later down the line.
It seems like they've given up on the remaining hostages now.
So is that your sense that the ceasefire is now over? The war has been resumed?
Well, I mean, when you're bombing all those targets and killing 50, 60 or more people, clearly, the ceasefire is not in effect. Now, maybe it could be resumed. It sort of depends on Hamas. But
Why do you say?
and also
Why do you
it
say?
went-
Why do you say that it depends on Hamas?
Well, if they just decide to essentially take it on the chin and let the Israelis bomb them without responding in any discernible way, then maybe the Israelis will just stop and the ceasefire will resume. I don't really know because it's hard. I don't know exactly what the Israeli sort of tactical objective is here with these renewed strikes. But I was going to say it's also up to Israel.
But what about the United States? I mean, are they going to just, given what we've seen in recent weeks, the involvement of Steve Witkoff in terms of getting the negotiations, the ceasefire negotiations back on track and so on, is the U.S. Going to support the war just being resumed in this way?
In short, yes. I think the Trump administration, with some exceptional moments, remains essentially beholden to the Israeli right or its representatives in the U.S. in our politics. And they don't seem willing to stand up for American interests. It's notable, for example, that the U.S. hostage negotiator, Adam Boehler, was fired after the Israelis complained about him talking directly to Hamas and doing an interview or a series of interviews where he sort of differentiated between U.S. and Israeli interests and said, I'm not an Israeli, I don't work for the Israelis. So, the Trump administration maybe will change their stripes in the future, but at the moment, they seem even more eager than the Biden administration was to do the bidding of the Israelis and unwilling to stand up to them and say enough is enough.
I just want to tell our viewers, update our
I don't want to
viewers on
derail,
the
but is there
latest
going to be pushback from the UN at this point? What pushback can they do?
We understand
They have nothing.
86 people have now been killed in these latest airstrikes by the Israeli military that have taken place in the last few hours. And according to the Israeli military, they are prepared to continue attacks against Hamas commanders and infrastructure in Gaza for as long as needed and would expand the campaign beyond airstrikes. That's what we're hearing from the Israeli military this evening. So in terms of, just coming back to you again, Benjamin, in terms of the ceasefire, if it is actually still ongoing, we've been very much in limbo between stage one of the ceasefire and Hamas wanting to go into negotiations about the stage two and Israel wanting to extend stage one. Is it possible that these attacks could be some sort of negotiating tool to put pressure on Hamas?
Yes, I think that's possible. I don't really know, what the kind of tactical thought is here or what this has to do with the negotiations, but it's certainly possible that there's some logic in the negotiations and the Trump administration being briefed in advance is a way to say, look, we're just trying to put some more pressure on Hamas to essentially amend the original ceasefire deal in our favor. And the Trump administration, of course, would go along with that.
And how much sense what is your sense publicly of how much appetite there is globally? I mean, we've seen protests resume in recent weeks in Canada and elsewhere after Israel began their blockade on aid once again on the Gaza Strip. How do you think the public, the international public, will react to the resumption of fighting in Gaza?
Well, certainly, I think if the ceasefire is indeed over, you could see a resumption of protests in many places in the world, but including here in the United States, in Washington, as we had under the Biden administration. But as with Biden, it's not clear that even really massive protests in the United States will have much effect on the policy because of the political calculations that the people on top of the government in both parties are making.
Hamas has said in a statement that the Israeli government decided to overturn the ceasefire agreement and warned that this move exposes the remaining hostages of Gaza to an unknown fate. We demand that the mediators hold Netanyahu fully responsible for violating and overturning the ceasefire agreement, Hamas said. The Houthis went from looking for one piece to being in multiple pieces. Lamau is such a fucking pathetic display of loserdom as an American citizen. Like, in your mind, you think you're demonstrating a show of strength, and all you've done is bomb by using your fucking free college tuition that's never going to happen, by using infrastructure spending that will never happen for you, by taking away your future and deploying it overnight to kill fucking 50 civilians in Yemen. The American government once again is showing their major display of power. Meanwhile, this initiative that cost $1 billion when the Biden administration tried it was a failure, an abject failure, which is why they had to stop 86. Sorry, I thought it was 50 plus. Like, you can fantasize about dominating the poorest country on the planet. Okay? You can fantasize about it, but that's not a display of power. It's a display of weakness. It's a display of how little the American government gives a shit about you, by the way, as well. They're doing this for Israel. The American government cares more about Israel continuing its genocide. Oh, no, I was talking about Yemen, not Gaza. 86 in Gaza. The number in Gaza has risen to 86. That's crazy. I'm talking about Yemen. I think it's like, I don't know what the exact numbers are. I think it's 50 in Yemen. That's all you do. All America's doing in its America First agenda is basically bombing Yemen because Yemen said that they would restart the blockade that they had stopped during the ceasefire because Israel was not following on the conditions of the ceasefire. They denied humanitarian aid from going into the Gaza Strip before actively bombing the Gaza Strip as they started tonight. Yeah, here, this is a perfect demonstration of what I'm talking about. I just saw this tweet on my timeline. Yeah, the Houthis are about to be eliminated from the face of the earth from breaking 911. My daughter's math class had to move to the cafeteria today because the roof has more leaks and the room had buckets. I'm not going to repost this person. I don't know what their fucking take is. But think about that. Think about that. Every dollar being spent on offensive weapons that are being used on random civilians and like children overseas is a dollar that could have been spent in your classrooms, is a dollar that could have been spent on fixing your potholes, a dollar that could have been spent on giving you free health care, giving you fucking at cost medicine. And you know that's never going to happen. So you have to sit there like a pathetic fucking loser and celebrate the violence. Because if you don't celebrate that violence, after all of this is said and done, you have nothing, right? Like all of this violence and display of force has to amount to something. Because if it doesn't, if we don't celebrate the cruelty for the pure sake of cruelty, then why is my school leaking, you know? Why are classroom sizes 48 people now? Why is it? It's because all that money is going to Israel and also in defense of Israel. That's it. You are completely wrong here. Who is this fucking Muppet talking? Oh my God, you are completely wrong here. What do you mean? No, not every single dumbass that's like celebrating the What? Because you say I having? What? Trey Yang says horrific images already circulating from inside Gaza, the aftermath of Israeli airstrikes. One shows a small baby wearing a jumpsuit with rainbows on it who was killed. The death toll continues to rise. Talks of around 300 casualties around Gaza. Ambulances are now rushing. Casualties means dead and wounded, by the way. It doesn't mean just dead. Al-Aqsa Hospital is inundated with casualties. The number of doctors is not enough to treat the patients. No medical supplies and aid were allowed during the ceasefire. Just horrific images of unjustifiable cruelty coming from Gaza once again. The number of the dead has risen to 86.
The ceasefire to take hold, and
people were killed in Yemen.
That was, something to gloat about by both presidents.
Yeah, look at the terrorist children, dude. Look at that. The face of terror in Yemen.
But in the sense that in this conflict between Palestinians and Israel, there's little to gain transactionally, the U.S., from helping the Palestinians. And given the bipartisan support for Israel in this country, there's little to gain politically for Trump as well. So he has always been 100% on the side of the Israelis, and he has been proud to proclaim that to the American public. And in fact, we were talking with your guest earlier about the international protests in support of Palestinians. Those have really been chilled here in the United States since Trump has began deporting non-U.S. citizens who have participated in those protests. And that is an ongoing story that's really captured the headlines in the United States. And in fact, there is a chilling effect. There's simply not as many people out on the streets protesting for Palestinian rights. That, again, is part of the unpredictable nature of Trump, as you said. Few people know how he's going to crack down on those who are in support of Palestinians, and few people know how he's going to continue with this policy toward the Middle East.
Indeed. Okay, thank you for that. Hadi Jo Castro there for us in Washington, D.C. I just want to recap where we are at the moment. The breaking news from the last hour. There have been a series of Israeli airstrikes being carried out across the Gaza Strip. It is the biggest assault since the ceasefire came into effect on January 19th earlier this year. We understand at least 86 Palestinians have been killed so far, including children. Now, in a statement, Hamas has said, accused Israel of unilaterally breaking the ceasefire deal. They're calling on the UN Security Council to intervene and force an end to these attacks. Let's go now on the phone.
What the fuck? Why did you send me Ashhark breaking news to tell me the White House spokeswoman, she was just on Fox News? And even all of this darkness, there's a little bit of room for laughter, it seems, where a chatter is like telling me that the American White House spokeswoman said Hamas, the Houthi group, and Iran, and anyone who wants to intimidate Israel or America will pay the price. But instead of sending me like an American news outlet where she probably said this, you sent me Ashhark, the I guess local Qatari. Is a Saudi outlet? Is it a Saudi outlet? He's like, no, you don't understand, little bro. Ashhark is tapped in.
In case something happens. So the situation is really, really hard. The Israelis F-16 warplanes are hovering heavily above our heads, and the drones also. And we're really, really scared.
I can't even imagine what you're going through, Ahmed. We're just looking at some of the pictures that have come through to us. Bodies and injured people being carried around on donkey carts and so on, desperately trying to get medical help. What can you tell us about the availability of?
I hope they draft every fuckface that comes into my chat that's like, hell yeah, we're blowing fucking children in Yemen to bits. I hope all of you get fucking drafted. If that's the attitude you have, then, you know, I hope you get fucking drafted to go, I don't know, try and defend Israel, okay? You stupid bitch. Surely you'll enjoy the process. Do you think Trump coordinated the protester crackdown with Israel re-engaging? No, I don't think that they coordinated the protester crackdown with that. I think the Yemen thing they coordinated, though. Israel's Channel 14 says the opening wave of attacks in the Gaza Strip has ended. We await the results, which may become clearer in the morning. Airstrikes will continue at varying levels. Jackson Hinkle is a Fed, 100% confirmed. Last month, Raja Alouei traveled to Beirut, Lebanon to attend the funeral of Hassan Nasrallah, a brutal terrorist who led Hezbollah, responsible for killing hundreds of Americans over a 4-decade terrorist spree. Yeah, how come Jackson Hinkle gets to do that with no issue? Yeah. The Israeli army has killed Major General Mahmoud Abu Wafa, Deputy Minister of the Interior in Gaza, following an airstrike targeting his home in Gaza City. Oh. There's also a ground invasion in West Bank right now from Mariam Barghouti. Israeli army is carrying out a large-scale aerial attack, carpet bombing in Gaza, and it's carrying out a large-scale ground invasion north of the West Bank with reinforcements sent to Jenin and Qalqilia. Yeah, the person that they killed, by the way, regardless of the title, general, is a civilian position. Meanwhile, Trump is also violating all norms and all rules, and what remains of the constitutional protections afforded to people here at the domestic front. Great stuff overall, just actively worsening the situation
everywhere. Other parts of Gaza in the last few weeks since the ceasefire, so many people, displaced people, have tried to move back home to parts of northern Gaza, which they haven't had access to for over a year and a half. And it sounds like in these latest strikes that attacks are taking place across the Strip, including the north, including the south. I mean, what are you hearing in terms of the areas that have been affected and the people, many of the people, the displaced people who've managed to move back home to the north? What are they saying to you?
They're really, really scared. You know, like in the past months, they start already to cope or to find a place, find a room or clean it, or try to drink some water. And these zones were like invaded by Israeli occupation, so now they are frightened. So if there's like the military like operations come back to the city, they have to flee, and there's no other places to flee to. I know how. I don't know if you understand or you know how does it look like to flee from a place to another, but just it's really, really hard, especially if you have kids, if you have infants, and people, the most thing that they are scared of. They are afraid to flee again, scared to run again from a street to another at this time at night. And the thing is that the Israelis do not differ between civilian or a fighter, so they kill anyone moves. So they can't now even flee or leave outside Gaza, or even
109 Palestinians already reported to have been killed in Israeli strikes.
Previously mentioned, Gaza City now is really, really crowded, and if there is any strike in any house, you will see the entire neighborhood is affected, and the kind of bombs that the Israelis uses right now are really, really heavy and affect all the neighborhood. Now I'm talking to you, and I can't even hear your sound because of the drones hovering above our heads. It's really, really annoying, and we can't even sleep on it. And this time exactly, the Gazans are awake to have the suhoor meal in the holy month of Ramadan. The children used to wake up and enjoy the meal right now, but now every father is holding his babies and trying to calm them down a little bit, and they already start to forget war, and now they are back to the 0 point, and they don't know or don't realize what's going on.